Welcome to the Album Anniversary Podcast. Today's show is about Brace Yourself for the Mediocre by Roper. It was released October 19th, 2004, and is celebrating a 20-year anniversary. Oh, and I'm going to touch on a couple other albums. It's kind of going to be like the show was originally, so, brace yourself for the mediocre. I'm your host, Caleb, or Caleb the Spy, on Twitter and Instagram, and every day on those social media sites I post about what I call album anniversaries. And look, it's just the anniversary of the album's release date. If I don't know that release date, I've just picked a date on the calendar to celebrate that album, and that's how this all started. A couple years ago, I created a calendar to celebrate the release date of some of my favorite albums. In the last year or so, the list of albums has grown significantly, and I now have over 2,000 albums tracked on my calendar. On this show, we take time, we stop, and we want to talk through, celebrate, and enjoy one of those albums. The albums on the show often focus on alternative rock, punk, or my strange obsession with ska. In the 90s, I was super into the Christian music scene, so that comes up often on the show, and I've always had a fascination with historically important albums or musical events. Today, I'm joined again by Todd to answer 5 simple questions about Brace Yourself for the Mediocre by Roper. Todd, welcome back. Hey, you're going to be on the show and we're not going to talk about a ska album or a ska band. Well, we kind of probably will, but...
Yeah, it is bizarre for me. But yeah, I think this is my 3rd episode, but first non-ska episodes. Yeah, it'll be a change of pace.
Yep, so I'll throw out a couple plugs. If you want to hear Todd talk about Scalleluja, you can go check out that episode. I also got to do a brief interview with Joe Yerke from The Insiders for that. But Todd talked, that was one of my first shows, kind of really focusing on one album. We went on for, I think, almost 2 hours. There's not just talk about Scalleluja, it's a whole bunch of topics, but that's back in the feed.
That was that one of your more popular episodes, Caleb?
Yes, it was. The Joe Yerke draw was until the David Bazan draw.
Oh, okay.
That really helped me. He listened to our episode on Curse the Branches.
Oh, okay.
And then he actually tweeted out a link to it and said, "Hey,
Great.
You guys should check this out." So that is my most popular episode.
Cool.
So yeah. And then you also joined me for my Christian Ska Extravaganza, where we talked for over 2 hours about all sorts of Christian ska things and Christian ska bands, and we talked about our favorites, and that also was one of my more popular episodes and super, super fun.
For sure. Listen to the very end because you can hear my thesis on Kierkegaard and Reese Roper.
Yes, That one we also were up till at least, I think it was 1 for us, and then Philip was up till, I think, almost 2 recording, so that one went on for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah. So those are the 2 episodes that Todd's been on before, but glad to have you back for a 3rd time. I threw a bunch of albums out on social media and said, "Hey, who's interested in talking about this?" And you'd said, Roper is an intriguing one. So glad you were able to make this work, and we'll get this out. So
if you ever want to do any of the Supertone side projects, I'm also ready.
Oh, man.
If you want to do doctorate in cold rockin' it by Mojo, yeah, we can. I have that whole album memorized.
Whoa. I don't know if I'll ever get to that one. I'll be totally honest.
I might have to do my own show.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, that's what we're doing.
I'll invite you on.
Little preview. I might be having a guest host coming up where he's got a guest. He's got an album he wants to talk about. So, maybe we could get there. If you want to, you don't want to do your own show, but you want to occasionally guest host here. You just finding the guest would be the tricky thing. So, but you could probably find somebody. So
there you go. Great segue.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that out of the way, let's jump in and talk about this album. I'm going to break in for a second here and talk about October 19th. It's another one of these huge days on the calendar. And again, like I try and do albums or shows or episodes based around albums that are celebrating what I call a big anniversary, something ending with a 5 or a 0. You know, so right now it's 2024, so I'm celebrating albums that, were 1984, 1994, 2004, or 2009, 1999, something like that. And so this date in particular, just kind of like June 15th, and if you want to see how crazy I can make this show, on June 15th, I did like 10 albums. I had like 7 different guests. People just joined me. We'd talk about an album quick. It was total chaos, and it was not something I can repeat on a regular basis or maybe at all. But October 19th ends up being one of those days that has all these great albums. And I wanted to stop for just a couple minutes and acknowledge some of those albums that were released on October 19th and are kind of celebrating some of these big anniversaries. And there's so many of them here that I'm not even going to mention Versus by Pearl Jam, which is just not celebrating a big anniversary. That's how good of a day this is. So I'm just focusing on albums, again, celebrating a big anniversary on October 19th, because I couldn't do them all. I chose the Roper album because it means a lot to me. And so these are other ones that hopefully I'm still doing the show in a couple of years and I can swing back and do a couple of these, or, we'll see. I'm going to do my best to go quick here. There's 10 of them that I want to mention. I will try and go fast. I don't want to just make it me going, too crazy, but I am going to go a little fast on these. So Prince by Prince was released in 1979, so that is celebrating a 45-year anniversary. There's a great story about this album that he just did everything. The record company would kind of keep on hiring people to help him, and he would just say, "No, I'm good, I got it," and just would continue doing it. Like everything from all the instrumentation to all the production down to the photography. He had somebody hired for the photography. The record company was like, "This is who should do the cover album," and he was like, "No, I got my own person." So again, he was like a 19-year-old or 20-year-old. He's a super young guy when this album comes out, and he does like everything on this album, and it's a great album. So Prince by Prince, his self-titled album, again released in 1979. I believe, I don't have this in my notes, so if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I believe it was his second album. Let's talk about a couple more from 1979. Often this day, October 19th, is referred to as Ska Day because The Specials by The Specials, their debut self-titled album, came out on this day in 1979, again, October 19th. It's a classic. I think it's absolutely fabulous. It's also produced by Elvis Costello, which is a fun little fact. Why we refer to this as Ska Day is because One Step Beyond by Madness was also released on October 19th, 1979, again, 45 years ago. I will say this album's not as good as the Specials album, in my opinion, but it is still a great album. So 2 classic two-tone ska albums come out on the same day in 1979. Pretty fun, pretty special in my opinion. So you should absolutely go back and check out all 3 of those albums from 1979. But it's a good day to have a little fun with the ska, The Specials, and One Step Beyond by Madness. Not an album, but actually a movie is the next thing I want to talk about. Released in 1984, so 40 years ago, Stop Making Sense, the movie by the Talking Heads, was released. And this will go down as one of the greatest live concert films ever. It's a really, really good live album, but it's not released on this day. It was the movie that was released on this day. I do own that album. It's a great album. So just making reference to that this movie was released October 19th, 1984, 40 years ago. The Skatalites are a mostly instrumental ska group from Jamaica. They were these famous, very, very talented musicians that would put out these mostly instrumental ska albums. And High Bop Ska by the Skatalites released in 1994, so 30 years ago. I will say I'm not 100% sure on this date on this one, but the This Is Ska channel, it's a radio show, but he also does a lot of these also album anniversaries just focused on ska albums. I think he puts the release date on this date as well in 1994, October 19th again, but I'm not 100% sure. Again, it's an instrumental ska album. It's considered their best by a lot of people, and it's really, really great. Again, it's not something you're going to maybe put on and listen and just focus in on. But I think ska instrumental albums by like the Skatalites are a great thing to have on in the background. They're great background music and just some really, really talented musicians making some really, really interesting music. All right, let's move on to 1999, and there's 2 albums that are about as far away from each other as humanly possible. First one is Operation Doomsday by MF Doom. MF Doom is a legend, and this is a unique and wonderful hip hop experience. Again, released 25 years ago. I think it's his debut under MF Doom. Maybe that's Food. I think Operation Doomsday is his debut under MF Doom. It's an absolute classic. Great listen. Super enjoyable. MF Doom is, again, one of a kind. You should, if you're into hip hop at all and you've never sat down with Operation Doomsday, today's your day. Go check that album out. Although you're not going to have a lot of time if I'm going through all these albums. But Operation Doomsday by MF Doom, 25-year anniversary. Absolutely great. The other one from 1999 is The Trouble with X by the W's. It was their second album, and it's not probably, in my opinion, quite as good as their first one. It's a little more serious, and I don't know. I honestly don't know, but I think they were kind of struggling to figure out what to do with the swing thing, because swing really had kind of come and gone, and they really were on that side of things. I still think it's a great album. I still think it's worth listening to. Again, I said it on my ska show that I think they are probably one of the most talented groups from that Christian ska scene, and it's an album that's totally worth checking out. It can be a little hard to find, but again, now the W's have released the vast majority of their discography onto streaming. It's all under one collection. It is missing one song because that song was written by somebody outside the band. It was actually written by Dennis from Five Iron Frenzy. He's the trombone player, but so that's the one song that is missing from that collection if you don't have these on CD. But The Trouble with X by the W is also celebrating a 25-year anniversary. And before I forget, The Trouble with X, I believe, I'm recording this in advance, so I may not be 100% accurate, but I believe my sources tell me that Church Jams Now might have an entire episode on this day on The Trouble of X. So if it's around October 19th, I'd look for that episode. Again, that's my sources have told me that's something to potentially look for. Moving on to two albums from 2004 and then a album that could have been from 2004. Wow, that was a real big preface or a real big preview for something that's not going to be all that important to a whole lot of people. So 2004, Futures by Jimmy Eat World was released, again, October 19th. So a 20-year anniversary. Again, absolutely an album I could have done a show about. I bet you I would have had a ton of people who were interested in doing it. Specifically because I know when I posted about this album last year, a number of people considered this their best album. So I know I'd be able to find people to talk about this album. It is a great album. I think it's really, really good. I'm not like a Jimmy Eat World ultra fan. I really, really like them. But I'm not like a kind of a super fan. Again, I think I could have had tons of people to talk about this one. Lots of people consider it their best album. I think it's absolutely great. It's a great listen, super enjoyable. So Futures by Jimmy Eat World from 2004. The other one from 2004 is, I'm going to mess up the name of this, I know it, but No Sir, Nihilism is Not Practical by Showbread. Now, I will fully admit, Showbread, not really my thing. I know they've got a lot of variety, but just kind of that heavier side, some of that metal stuff, just not really my thing. There are people who just love Showbread to no end. I mean, people who love Showbread, absolutely obsessed. I think this is one of their more famous albums. I think it's one that stands out. I think it was one that maybe had its most mainstream, and I mean mainstream and kind of the tooth and nail scene kind of exposure. I could be totally off on that, but I know this was a big one for them. Again, 2004, so a 20-year anniversary. One thing that is kind of ironic about it is it does feature a Reese Roper feature on the album. So he is on this album as well as the album we're going to talk about in a couple minutes. So No Sir, Nihilism is Not Practical by Showbread, released in 2004. And then I want to highlight one other kind of unique thing about October 19th, 2004, is that this was the date that originally was planned for the Mars Ill album Propane. If you don't know about Propane, it was their follow-up to Backbreakonomics, which was their second album. So this would have been their third full-length, not mixtape or EP or whatever you want to call those things. This was going to be their third album. They had moved to Goatee. Maybe on Backbreakonomics they were on Goatee, but this was one that I think was building. There was a ton of anticipation about it. And because of that, because they had kind of grown in popularity and they were releasing a bigger album, before this album could come out, they realized that they hadn't cleared all the samples and they had to pull it. They had to start over on a number of songs, and I believe almost every song ended up getting touched in some way. and that would end up delaying this album until May of 2006. I was super, super excited for that album. Mars Hill is still my favorite rap group, my favorite hip hop group, and I was so excited for this album, and then it got delayed and delayed and delayed. They released a couple things to kind of fill the void, I want to say. They released, I'm not going to remember them off the top of my head, but they kind of released some mixtapes in the meantime. But the delay, I think, really hurt them in the end. 2006, I think it just took too long in between releases, and it's really, really unfortunate. It is a good album. I still think Backbreakonomics is their best album, but just another little interesting tidbit. Again, October 19th, 2004 could have also had the release of Propane by Mars Hill, a really, really great album. But again, it ended up being delayed until May of 2006. So there you go. There's my 10 other music-related tidbits from October 19th. And again, there's other albums. This day has a ton of releases. If you go check me out on Twitter or Instagram, you'll see I think it's almost 15, 16 albums or musical things that I talk about on this day. But those were some of the ones that were kind of celebrating big anniversaries or mentioned on big days. So again, I thought those would be worth mentioning. Okay, with that out of the way, we are going to go back. We'll bring Todd back in, and we actually will get into talking about Brace Yourself for the Mediocre by Roper. Thanks for indulging me on this. Again, I think this is probably the way I'm going to handle some of these. I'm going to choose albums that I think I can do an episode on, but I might start doing this just brief break to talk about some other albums from that day because, yeah, that's fun. And I don't think I'm going to be able to do a podcast on every last one of these, unfortunately. I'm going to have to pick and choose, even if the show lasts long enough to circle back to some of these, because, again, none of these will celebrate a big album release again for another 5 years. So there you go. There's some things to talk about. I've jabbered on long enough. Let's get back to the regular show. So again, we're talking about Brace Yourself for Mediocre. I forever thought it was mediocre. Like, I thought he was like playing with the word, but that is actually how you spell mediocre. So I'm just really, really bright. So by Roper, of course, released October 19th. I feel pretty confident of this date. I've started to preface a lot of these, but I feel pretty confident, especially because of all the other albums released on October 19th, 2004. That seemed to be a big release date for a number of albums. So October 19th, 2004, celebrating a 20-year anniversary. This is the first, and I think it will be the only album we'll ever get from the band Roper. But yeah.
For sure. That's, and then this gets into a point you have coming here, but that, the name was forced on him from us. I've heard Reese tell the story before.
Yeah.
And that was not his idea. He did not want to call it Roper, but was basically told, like, hey, this is how you get this out there, is we call it Roper because people recognize you. So
yes.
You basically, you have brand recognition as Reese Roper.
I think they thought they had more brand recognition than they did,
Probably,
which is a whole other part of the conversation. But so this comes out. Five Iron had broken up, and for a while, Reese had committed to doing Guerrilla Rodeo. And if you saw Five Iron on their final tour in 2003, you could pick up this little 3-song EP. It's really, really great. I'd love to try and do a show on it at some point, but it's too hard to find, and you can find it on YouTube. I know somebody has uploaded it, but it's really good. It had members from Ace Troubleshooter in it. Ethan Luck was going to be in it, and then Sonny Johnston was going to be in it as well from Five Iron. The story I've heard is that one of the members secretly started talking with Tooth and Nail and had signed a contract with Tooth and Nail, and Reese bailed because he had a less than enjoyable experience with Tooth and Nail because the second Brave Saint Saturn album was put out by Tooth and Nail, and so he bailed on the project, and the Guerrilla Rodeo died with Reese leaving, is what I've heard.
I have not heard all of that, but that fits with Reese, I think. I could see how if that happened, that Reese would lose interest.
Yep.
Yeah, in the
Yeah.
project.
So it's unfortunate. I've thought about this, that maybe instead of doing an episode where I cover that album, it'd be really interesting to do a what if on that.
Oh,
what if it doesn't happen? Because I honestly think, gosh, this is so off on a tangent, and I probably will never do an episode on it, but I honestly think that band survives because you've got Ethan Luck, who I think Reese respects. Sonny, obviously, he gets along well with Sonny from Five Iron.
I think everybody loves Ethan Luck.
Yeah, exactly.
I love Ethan Luck. Like, I think, yeah. If you don't like Ethan Luck, you might have to do some some introspection.
Yeah. I just wonder if being back in that band with experienced band people, who are used to touring, who can kind of help him just deal with the weight of it, where like he joins this and like we've mentioned, it gets his namesake. It's all about him. And instead, Guerrilla Rodeo maybe would have been about the five of them. And I wonder if it lasts and you actually never get a Five Iron reunion, all sorts of things. So,
yeah, not to tie this too closely to the immediate present here,
right.
in October of 2024. But just recently, and I don't think you've heard this, because I don't think you don't get the Patreon episodes, but Reese was literally just talking about his gripes with Five Iron Frenzy.
Sure.
In this bonus episode, which is not new. He's talked about that before,
yes.
But specifically, this ties into what you just said. One of his big issues is he wanted to make a living as a musician, and he doesn't feel like some of the other people in his band did feel that way.
Yeah.
It was more just a thing to do. So, but, if that band had stayed around and now he's tied to these other people who are also committed to trying to be, working musicians.
Yep.
Who knows what could have happened? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've straight up heard, not to get too much onto the Five Iron tangent, but like they were offered a big record deal after As Electric Boogaloo was coming out. Oh. And they were offered, it was a major deal, but part of the deal was that they would have to tour for 2.5 years straight. Oh. And by that point, 3 or 4 of the members were married, and they just said, no, we're not doing that. I'm not doing that. And that really was the end of them. I know they would make it a couple more years and one more album, and then they'd come back. But that was the end of them, because I think they that's what I've heard. Again, that could be false, but they were offered, major label record deal, but that was part of the stipulation, and they turned it down. And then that was kind of the end of Five Iron Frenzy, is that they just didn't feel like they could make it not being on a major label, but they couldn't deal with what the major label wanted them to do. And again, that's what I understand. If that's wrong and you've heard something else, I apologize, but that's what I have heard. So Guerrilla Rodeo doesn't make it. He goes back to 5 Minute Walk. He decides to try and make it that. He is given, I think you've heard it as well, he is forced to use this name. It's not the name he wanted to use, but I think they tried to capitalize on some of that late Five Iron, because late Five Iron success was real success. That final tour was a bigger deal than I think they thought, and I think they thought it was gonna draw people in, and it just really didn't.
Yeah, Five Iron, and this is just anecdotal, but of any of the CCM bands I listened to, they were one of the only ones where I felt like my friends who were in the mainstream alternative music scene were at least knew who Five Iron Frenzy was. Yeah. So I could see, trying to capitalize on that recognition.
Yeah. And this is anecdotal as well, but like if you see how they go out in 2003, that final tour, they'd sell out the Fillmore, which was a big deal for a Denver band, comparatively to how the Supertones go out. The Supertones, in my opinion, kind of go out with a whimper. I mean, I don't think there was any big fanfare about the breakup of the Supertones.
No.
There's no big fanfare about the breakup of the Insiders. Those bands kind of go out with whimpers, as opposed to Five Iron kind of went out and people were like, this is a big deal for those of us who were into it. Not everybody, but those of us who were into them, it was a big deal.
I agree. Yeah, I felt the same way.
Yeah. So he goes back to 5 Minute Walk. They put out this album. This ends up being, I think this is not the last 5 Minute Walk album, it's one of the last 2 or 3. but I think it is the last 5 Minute Walk album. And I have no research to back that up. I'd have to do some digging and look it up. Yeah. But I feel really, really confident because kind of post 5 Iron, 5 Minute Walk is dead. So I think it's the last, if not the last, it's one of the last couple 5 Minute Walk albums, which is also a little sad that that's the end of 5 Minute Walk, but it is what it is. It was produced by Saki, who had done all the 5 Iron albums up to that point. And it says in the booklet, because I have 2 booklets of this because it once got stolen from my car. So I only have 1 CD of it, but I have 2 of the booklets. Nice. It is produced by Saki and a guy named Maverick. And I don't know who that is. I suspect it's Reese, but I have nothing to base that off of, but that's my guess. Yeah. Okay. So Saki would get 6 writing credits on this album. So, because I think that is one of the things that Reese, I think, will fully admit he's not the most proficient music writer. Lyrics are definitely his thing. So Saki gets 6 writing credits on this. And then Ethan Luck gets 5, and we'll get to him in a second because he's also called out in another section. So Ethan Luck co-writes 5 of the songs. And I think there's like 13 on this album. So I don't know if a couple he did on his own, but those are kind of the big highlights.
Are the lyrics, though, predominantly Reese, I'm assuming? Like it's music by these other guys, but lyrics by Reese? Okay.
Yeah, the lyrics, except for the Shania Twain cover.
Okay, yeah. In general, I was going to say the lyrics are very Reese Roper.
Yes, yeah. So some of the musicians on this, Frank Lentz and Jason White both did drums. A guy named Elijah Thompson, I don't know who that is, did bass. A guy named Phil Bennett did organ. And then a guy named Bob Chivalry, I'm really good at pronouncing stuff, did guitar, as well as Ethan. And then, of course, Ethan gets the 5 writing credits. And then I have it called out somewhere later. Reese does all the keys on this, not the organ, but there's a lot of keyboard on this, and there's a specific keyboard he used. I'm going to try and find it in my notes real quick. Hold on.
I don't know if I get this from Magnified Pod, but the use of the phrase bleeps and bloops.
Oh, okay.
And definitely, that's early on in this album, at least. Yeah, you can tell that Reese likes, the synthesizer, the keyboard tones.
Yes.
Because, obviously he also did Brave Saint Saturn. But early on, you hear the synthesizer, and I'm like, oh, there's Reese with bleeps and bloops.
Yeah, it's a Nord keyboard. Apparently it's a specific brand. And I do remember I did see them once live and in concert, and he would be up there with the keyboard next to him. So it was 4 other guys and him, or I think it's 3 other guys on tour and him. And he would play the keyboard during the live set. So yeah.
Fascinating.
The album would end up 46 on the Heat Seekers. I have no idea how that works, but I mention it almost every show because all these albums end up on the Heat Seekers. So I don't know if that's good or bad. We don't know. Ultimately, though, I think we can say this was a commercial failure. I think that this did not sell anywhere near what Frank Tate of 5 Minute Walk was expecting or hoping. Yeah. They were not able to capitalize, and I think this was a total failure. And in fact, again, if you ever listen to this and I'm wrong, I've heard Reese went into pretty good debt for this album that he was still paying off for a while. And again, I think that adds to some of maybe his bitterness, and I know that is a harsh word, but I think some of his bitterness and some of those things that come out of this, because he still has boxes of Reese t-shirt or of Roper t-shirts. He still has got some debt that I know, or he maybe doesn't have it anymore, but I think he carried some debt out of this album. Yeah. So that's my, again, hearsay a little bit, but I feel fairly confident of those facts.
I definitely could not corroborate that, but it seems to make sense that it did not seem to be the success they were hoping for.
No, yep. I think they toured a couple times. I think I saw them open for the Supertones is the band I saw them with, but I don't think they ever did a headlining tour. I know they played Cornerstone maybe once, but this was pretty short-lived after 2004. I think they were done by the end of 2005. Let's jump into our first question is how did you discover this album? And this is going to be a funny one because I know the answer to this for you. But yeah, how did you discover this album?
Oh no, I hope you're right. I think I just discovered it at the Christian bookstore.
So you didn't see this coming? You didn't know that like Five Iron had broken up and this was coming out? That's really interesting. I was wrong.
Now I'm curious, how you thought that I heard about it. Yeah.
I mean, I just thought, because you were into Five Iron when they broke up, right?
Yes.
So were you like, how attached to the Christian scene were you still? Were you like checking out websites before you started your own and like, I think there were some forums or like Seven Ball Magazine, stuff like that?
I don't know if this is just my own faulty memory, but I do not recall really knowing what was going on.
Okay.
I knew they had broken up because when did like The End Is Here come out?
So The End Is Here, the live version comes out in April of 2004. The final show is in November of 2003. So this comes out almost a year later after that final show.
So I did know that. And maybe I did see it in some of these magazines like Seven Ball.
Okay.
But it was not something I, sat around waiting for. As far as I recall, just sort of found it at the bookstore. I was someone who sort of regularly just went and checked like the record section.
Nice.
And so I think that's how I found it. I don't recall waiting for it, basically.
Okay.
It was more of just a surprise. I think I do recall word of Gorilla Rodeo.
Okay.
And then that not panning out, but not really knowing anything about why.
Sure.
And then suddenly Roper.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't recall any specific like waiting, just like, oh, suddenly, hey, that's there. That's cool. I'll check that out.
Okay.
I do think, interestingly enough, even though, and I'm not going to get deep into it because we talked about it previously. But yeah, I was running this Christian ska website, but at the same time, I don't know if I was as into it as I had been like in high school because I'm a little bit younger than you are. I was in like my sophomore year of college at this time.
Okay.
And so I think I might not have actually been. I was maybe more broadening my musical horizons, even though I was, actually just starting to run a Christian ska website.
Okay.
I was broadening my musical horizons, so I might have just not been paying as much attention. But yeah, I basically was not someone who looked forward to albums as much as I just literally went to the bookstore and found them.
Just went and browsed. Yeah. Well, that's a cool way of doing it. It's just kind of, that's where it started for me. I mean, we've talked about it a lot that we just used to pull stuff off the shelf and go, I don't know, is this any good? Let's pay our $18 because that's how much they were back in the 90s for Christian CDs.
I'm sad that those stores are gone, but no, I don't know how often, but I would regularly go to the Christian bookstore, and I knew like what shelf generally like ska and similar things were on.
Yeah.
Like that's where I started. Then I just looked through all the other CDs and yeah.
So for me, I mean, this is an obvious answer. I was so into. I mean, I heard about it from somewhere, so I got this day one. I was so excited for this. I was like salivating at the idea of more Reese and more music from him and lyrics from him. So I know I got it day one. I knew I was anticipating it. I was expecting it to come out. I don't know if I was still on like an old Five Iron mailing list or something like that, but I do know I knew of it because of my connection with Five Iron, and I was still semi paying attention to the Christian music scene. So I know I got this from whether I ordered it online or I had got it from the Christian bookstore, but I feel very confident I had this on day one and probably listened to only this for the first week of its existence, is my guess.
Yeah, I definitely did not special order anything ever. So yeah, I guess a good way to put it, I was not as plugged into that. I was a much more passive, I will just go thumb through all of the albums and see what's available now.
Well, I still remember the first album I ever ordered online, pre-ordered, that it showed up at my door was All the Hype That Money Can Buy. So that's going back to all the way 2000. And I remember being so excited because it showed up in the mail like 2 days before the official release date. and I was so excited. So
I would purchase albums and merch and all of that at the Christian music festivals like
sure.
Cornerstone, but the last one I went to was while I was in high school back in 2001. So then I wasn't doing any of that anymore, and the only concerts I saw while I was in college were I think the Supertones came through like the Midwest.
Sure.
Because they would sort of like not do anything, and then suddenly like it's sort of surprising. Anyway, that's a digression. You can find like YouTube videos of like the Supertones doing things much later than I thought the Supertones were around.
Yeah, they stuck around for a while. So, yeah.
So yeah.
So this is the big one. What do you love about this album?
That's a great question, Caleb. And I should have considered my answer beforehand. I mean, in a way, I love that it reminds me of Five Iron Frenzy.
For sure.
I love that it's Reese.
Yep.
I do like the overall musical style, obviously. Like, I enjoyed it. I listened to it. It was in heavy rotation. You know, I was someone who, me and my friends would have parties at my parents' house because my parents had, like, a pool and stuff. And it being my house, I got to control the stereo.
Sure.
So was able for years to force people to listen to various Christian albums, and this was one of them. This was in rotation, so I listened to it a lot. Now, I suppose I just love that it's Reese. Really,
yeah.
I can't say much more than that. Other than I love that it's Reese. I think I love the same things about it that I would love about a Five Iron Frenzy album. You know, to borrow another thing that I've heard other people in the CCM nostalgia sphere use. I am definitely much more of a lyric guy than a vibe guy. You know, some people are vibe guys. That almost became like a heated topic during the first CCM Twitter tournament.
Sure.
Because some people who are vibe guys felt that those who are lyric guys like looked down upon them.
Sure.
That the lyric guys feel they're more intellectual. And I will not comment on whether or not I actually think that's true.
Yeah.
But because when I made comments about that, I really angered some people. But yeah, I'm definitely much more of a lyric guy. So that's why I said earlier, you can feel there's a lot of Reese lyrics going on here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are the things I love the most. So.
Yeah. For me, it's right in my musical like wheelhouse. It's you know, it's not ska, but these are the reasons I like ska as well. Like, I've heard it described as, you know, pop punk, and I think it is, but it doesn't feel as silly, even though at times it is a silly album, but it just doesn't feel as, I think the word I would use is it doesn't feel as immature as a lot of the pop punk stuff that's out there. So it's right in that wheelhouse, and I would actually describe it as, I think at times it's a little closer to power pop and with just a heavier punk influence. So that's right in my wheelhouse. You know, it's fast, it's that punk fueled stuff, it's this, you know, great pop sensibility, sonically diverse enough and unique that it's just captivating to me. You know, his little keyboard thing that we mentioned earlier, the Nord keyboard, it just gives that kind of rock with horns feel that Five Iron has, which I appreciate. I know that that's not true ska, but I think from a musical perspective, that's why this album stands out to me.
You know, I had not thought of that, but yeah, those keys do fill up some of the same space in the music that horns would fill.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, because I think, you know, that's something I wanted to say is some of these songs, at least, you could definitely just imagine throwing horns into them.
Yeah, for sure.
You know?
Yeah.
I do find it just funny, like country motif to the album. It's obviously not a country album.
Yep.
But like looking at the cover and whatnot, you think, am I in for like country and western?
Well, so I remember, because I remember when this came out, he did an interview where he said the goal would be, because they, at the end of it, we'll talk about it probably, there's a Shania Twain cover at the end of this thing. And that was what he was going to do, is every album they were going to cover a different country song. But of course, this was the only album we ever got, so we never got to see that progression. So yes, there is a weird country motif that goes along with this album, which I don't have any answers for, but yeah, that's what they were doing. So yeah. The other thing kind of musically is that I still think the music fits the words, because there's a lot of variety in the lyrics, and I'll get to the lyrics in a second, but like there's a lot of variety in the lyrics, and I do think musically it handles it really, really well. Like Reese has this whole thing, right, where a lot of his lyrics for Five Iron were always a little more upbeat and a little more fun, and then that's why he did Brave Saint Saturn, is that was a place to put his depressing lyrics and have it in a space where it fit the music, where this really does both of those well. This might as well transition. The lyrics of this are, they're silly, they're funny, they're serious, they talk about matters of faith, they're self-deprecating. And I think that this musically matches those really, really well, even though in general it's a pretty straightforward pop punk formula. But for some reason, I just think Saki and Ethan kind of really guided him well, and the lyrics match up with the music really, really well in this space.
I think you're right.
The other thing is that it's just really, really melodic. That's the other thing that really stands out about this. It just is. They did some nice vocal layering in here a couple times. I think, again, I'm no musician, but I think that this really fits his vocal range really well as well. So I think you get the best out of his vocals in this album.
I agree. If it is pop punk, it is very melodic, and that is my wheelhouse. So I guess that is somewhere where we agree.
Yeah.
I've heard people describe some of the bands that I like MXPX as, they're melodic pop punk, and that's my wheelhouse. I like things to be loud and perhaps have a pretty fast tempo, but I do like there to be like a catchy melody also,
Yeah.
So, it is in my wheelhouse for sure.
Yeah. And we'll get to some of the songs later, but I think it is just really interesting. Kind of what I mentioned, like it just has this great variety. It's self-deprecating, songs like Hello Lame Wads, You're With Stupid. That's the other thing, is there's a lot more romantic songs on here, but I use that term so loosely because even the romantic songs are like super self-deprecating. So it kind of draws this line between pop punk, where like pop punk romantic songs about girls, they feel at times a little silly, and like you kind of just have to go with it. But this feels silly in the good way, where it's like he's kind of playing with the girl songs and the songs about romantic interests in a way that is kind of almost funny, and he kind of is poking fun at the genre. I don't think he's put that much time into it. I think he's just really doing a good job, being a guy who was probably almost in his 30s when this came out, and being like, I'm just going to embrace what I'm doing here. So
I think the difference to me is the amount of irreverence. Like a Blink-182 is extremely irreverent, right?
Yes.
Like they are almost intentionally out to shock you sometimes. Yeah. Now, obviously, there are acts that are much more shocking.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you go to a G.G. Allin concert back in the day or something, and illegal things occurred.
Right.
But, Blink-182 they're saying things, like part of their entertainment is shock value.
Yeah.
Occasionally, at least. Like I'm thinking of certain things, but I'm not going to say on the podcast.
Don't make me do extra editing.
Yeah, exactly. But on the other hand, Reese, and what I love about that man is there is sincerity. Like even when he's being funny, I think he is like authentically tapping into like an emotion that he has felt and that he feels.
Yeah.
So it is like a genuine artistic expression, and not that being just funny to be funny is not artistic expression, but it has a different purpose. Like Reese is not only trying to make you laugh or whatever, though he sometimes might make you laugh.
Yeah.
He is trying to express something and connect with people.
Yeah.
So that's what I appreciate.
Yeah. And it also, this album does the flip side of that is it has some serious moments. There's some serious songs on here. And then I think it's some of his better lyrics about like issues of faith. I think there's the two songs that really jump out, and I know we'll talk about favorite songs later, but Quicksilver and In Excelsis Deo are really, really good, serious songs about faith. And so you get just so much little variety in here. Yes, it's silly, it's funny, but it's got serious moments and it's got spiritual moments, and it kind of just it walks a really, really good balance, in my opinion. I would argue this is actually some of Reese's best lyrical work, because I think he kind of got to do it at his own speed, his own pace, and he got to really take his time with it. I think up through maybe some of the new stuff is better, the new 5-iron stuff, but I think this is as good as old 5-iron, and maybe at times even a little more clever and a little better at times, because I think he got to do it at his own pace, and I think that may have helped him a little. Yeah. Our third question is, why is this album important to you? Or why is it something that holds up if it isn't important to you? For me, it's really important, but, why is this something that holds up still? Or why would you say it's something that's important to you?
So, I would say it holds up. I suppose it's hard for me to say that it's very important to me, given that it had been a while since I had listened to it.
Sure.
But part of that is just that it's not available on streaming services generally.
It is not. Yes, you have to find. It's hard to find.
Like I listened to lots of things on streaming, and if this was available on streaming, I would be listening to it. What we had to do was either I did both of these things. One, I listened to it on YouTube because years ago someone uploaded the full album to YouTube. In fact, two different people. One is a video with just the whole album, then someone else uploaded individual songs.
Yeah.
But then I also just bought on Discogs another copy of the CD because I don't know what happened to my original one.
Yeah. Maybe it's my stolen one that somebody's
could
reselling.
Yeah. So I would say it stands up in that it's melodic, poppy, punk, which is something I enjoy.
Yeah.
I don't think the lyrics are really dated at all. There's some albums where things might seem to just, evoke a specific period. Now, there's songs on here, especially, I suppose, 1985, that talk about a moment that was like nostalgia then.
Right.
And is even, continues to be nostalgia now.
Yeah.
But there's nothing, tying this to 2004 to me, really.
Yeah. I agree with that.
That's why I would say that it holds up pretty well.
Yep. I mean, for me, I hate to boil it down to this, but it's more Reese. And Reese has always been, I love 5-iron. I love their music. I love that part of it. But the 5-iron lyrics, that has been the overwhelming draw for me to 5-iron Frenzy is the lyrics. Yes. I say it over and over again. Reese has spoken to my heart through his lyrics. He has articulated things through his lyrics that once I hear them in the song, I kind of go, oh yeah, I've been thinking that for years and I've never figured out how to say it.
Yeah.
And so like that for me is, I hate to boil it down to that, but it's more Reese, and that's why it is really, really important to me still. Cause I got more and I was so excited. Now I get more of it through 5-iron again, which is great. But at the time I didn't think that was going to happen.
That's a valid point. Yeah. I feel the same way about Reese. I do. That's why 5-iron has continued to be relevant in that and the fact that they have came back probably helps.
Yeah.
But even if they had not came back, I would still be listening to them.
Yep.
And listening to them more than I listen to just about anything else. They're still one of my very top listens on Spotify. And that is because, as you said, I do feel like, one, Reese is authentic and also tends to be on many things on the same wavelength I am. It's the same way I feel about many thinkers or philosophers that I read. I read what they have to say, and I'm like, yeah, this guy or this lady is explaining things that I was thinking. Like,
Right.
this is how the world appears to me, and they're just explaining it.
Yeah.
And that's the same way I feel about Reese in a lot of things.
Yeah. And I think this album, in a lot of ways, this is kind of, in some ways, this is going to be I'm going to take on a potentially controversial take. In some ways, I think this is Reese at his most Reese. Like, this is him on his own. And I love Five Iron, and I hope they keep on every couple of years. We get a new album. I hope we don't have to wait as long as we did between An Engine of a Million Plots until this shakes apart. I would love to get more Five Iron more quickly. But I really, really feel like this is Reese at his most Reese, and I wish he would do this. I wish he would get with Ethan Luck or get with Scott and just say, hey, here's a melody that I have some lyrics for. Here's a lyrical pattern. I've got some ideas for how to fill out this song. Here's the melody. Here's kind of what I'm going for. Write me a pop punk song. Write me a power pop song. And I wish he would do that. I wish he would I think Ethan Luck and Scott Kerr from Five Iron could get together and pump out 13 songs, and then they could tinker with them, refine them. And I'd kickstart the crap out of that every time,
I would totally agree. I actually heard Reese speak to this topic recently on his podcast, and from what he was saying, a big part of the holdup is him, though I think part of it has to do with his life. Scott actually has like multiple sort of basic track ideas ready musically, and that waiting on Reese to write some lyrics, and Reese feels like he's sort of gotten into a writing slump, potentially some writer's block, but also that could have to do with things going on in his life and whatnot. But I agree that I hope there is more, and I do love Five Iron Frenzy. I have gone on record as saying they are the greatest band that God ever gave breath to. But I would also be happy to hear Reese come out with another project. If it was like, I don't know, a new Brave Saint Saturn, like whatever, if he, because I know he has that little studio, or at least I've seen, or he has in the past in his living situations. Like, heck, if he just throws something together in his studio, I'd listen.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the one of the things that makes this so important to me and does make it hold up for me. It's not going to do it for everybody, but I think this is, Reese at his most Reese in some ways. It's his as close as you're ever going to get Reese. I know it's not called Reese. It's not called Reese Roper. It's called Roper. But I still, in a lot of ways, think of this as a bit of a solo record, kind of like how Jeff Rosenstock, even though Jeff Rosenstock does his stuff with a band, it's got his name on it. And I would love to see Reese do that. And, I think, I don't think that'll happen. I really don't. But that's for me, one of the reasons it stands up is it's kind of Reese doing his thing without some of those other things going on, without having to deal with the band.
It is less restricted Reese.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Which would be really, really, being a listener of the Pickle and Boot Shop podcast, which, I don't do the Patreon. It would be really interesting to see what he would come up with, because he's a lot more unhinged and unrestrained than he was in 2004. So, yeah.
That's a good description.
Yeah,
yes.
Unhinged, exactly. So. Kind of made mention of it. What are some of your favorite tracks or songs from this album?
I feel like In Excelsis Deo might be my favorite.
Okay. That's the closer for anybody who's less familiar.
Yeah, it is the closer, but I mean I don't know. The lyrics speak to me.
Yep.
Here I have them. Yeah, the talk of a wooden soul. Like, this allegory or metaphor of, like, your soul, like, solidifying, dying, like, and, the potential, though, to bring new life, God loving me in my imperfection.
Yep.
And this goes to a metaphor that thinkers have used to talk about, like, the crooked timber of humanity. That we as human beings in a fallen state are basically like crooked timber, and that it takes work and time to straighten crooked timber. If you try to just straighten a crooked piece of wood, you're just gonna break it. So, like, it takes, like, care and time to straighten a piece of crooked timber.
Yeah.
And so I think that was all just powerful to me, though I didn't necessarily think of it in terms of that metaphor, but just this general idea of, like I'm growing old, I'm growing tired, like, but, conversely, I do love, Hello Lame Wads, right?
Yeah.
Though that almost seems to be part of a general through line through Reese of the, like, hey, we're the losers. Like, this is not the first time Reese has written a song about being a pencil-necked loser, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. And I don't know if you remember this or found anything. I swear that Red Eye to Miami was used in some sort of, like, film trailer or something. Like, I thought I remembered in the early 2000s actually hearing that song on a trailer. I don't know if it was for Red Eye, because there was a film by that name that came out, I think, just the very next year. But I looked up the trailer, at least the trailer I found did not have it. But I could have sworn, back at that time, and I've always been a big movie watcher, too. I go to a lot of films in the theater. Seeing a trailer that actually had Red Eye to Miami, like, used as background music in the trailer. So maybe Reese would know. Maybe someone would know.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. I would guess no, just because of I would guess that would have helped with the finances for this album a little, but true. I don't remember that. So yeah.
I mean, obviously I like the nostalgia of 1985.
Yep.
Being someone who was born around that time.
Sure.
Though I guess it's a little old for me, right? Like, it's not stuff but still, I feel like a connection to the 80s.
Yeah.
Even though I really mostly remember growing up in the 90s.
For sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's not a song on this that I dislike.
Yes, I agree with that. This is a no skip album for me.
Yeah, I mean, also Amplify is great as far as, like, uplifting to me.
Yeah.
I mean, How Your Halo Fell is another, like, Reese angry.
Yeah.
So they, I love them all. But yeah, I guess those are the things that stand out to me. But I think my favorite is In Excelsis Deo.
Yep. I love talking about a closer. That's one of my things about an album, and I think it's a great closer.
It does fit the general Five Iron vibe, like, from concerts, at least back in the day, of, like, let's close with something that's more of, like, this uplifting, like this spiritual thing. So
yeah, and I love the lines. I'll keep waiting patiently if this world will ever release me.
Yeah,
I love the way he sings. You'll love me even though I am untrue. That really comes through really strong. His vocal performance right there is really good. If I was perfect, I wouldn't need you. I'm the object of your affection. You love me still in my imperfection. It's really good lyrically. And then it goes into a little section where he throws in the Gloria, which is obviously a theme that he would go back. He used on the first Brave Saint Saturn album. Yes. He likes that Gloria phrase. I have a daughter named Gloria, so I have even more of an affection for when that comes up in songs. So yes, I think it's a great closer. I'm with you. It's one of my favorite tracks on the album. And I also think Hello Lame Wads is a great opening track.
Yes, Hello Lame Wads is
great. The drum part that kicks right in and then it flies right in, the Nord keyboard's going. It's a really, really great opener. And again, I'm going to steal this from Kylan because after he said it when he was on my show for the episode about funeral, and he says it on Church Jams Now, he wants an opener to be a thesis statement for an album. There's nothing more thesis statement about what Reese is going to do than a song called Hello Lame Wads, where he's embracing being a loser and then just goes on with the self-deprecating humor throughout the album. So it's a great opening track lyrically and musically, in my opinion. So that's another one of my favorites from this album. You mentioned it. Amplify is another one. I have a shirt still that I can mostly fit into, a Roper shirt that says Amplify on it. And it's a fun shirt. I think that is a really, really great song. Again, kind of some more serious or spiritual lyrics. All our lives we keep waiting, the meaning hidden deep inside. All our lives we're somehow made for this, to amplify. We dream, we cry, to amplify. We live, we die, to amplify. I love that idea, and I think he's talking about the idea of we live our lives to amplify God and to lift others up as well. And I think those are really, really well done lyrics, in my opinion. So I really like that song. That's a standout for me. Sorry, I'm going to two more that I want to mention. Red Eye to Miami is a great song, and what I love about Red Eye to Miami is that it is the perfect balance of totally ridiculously silly. Like it's about G.I. Joe. I mean, that is what the song is about, and it's totally ridiculously silly and yet perfectly serious. It's this weird, it pulls off this ridiculous balance of being funny and silly and totally serious, all in one fell swoop. And I don't know how it does it, but it does. Like, I get all serious about this stupid, silly song, and I totally get serious about it every time. So that's a really, really good one, in my opinion. And then the last one I want to mention is Quicksilver. And that, for me, again, has some of Reese's best lyrics. It said, the bridge on it is, I need this burning inside me, this brilliant aura, this electricity. I'm being haunted by specters of what might be, of imperfections, of nameless beauty. As life butchers, so sweet yet so sickening, we have betrayed for each tiny flickering. Yeah. He's so good.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And it's a C.S. Lewis take, but it's a great song. I think that might be my favorite song off the album. But that's an absolute killer track, in my opinion. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, you're fine. One little anecdote. I just remember I was in college, and also at the same time, my little part-time job while in college was I was a lifeguard at a YMCA. And there was this girl I worked with. I doubt that she's out there listening, but Ashley, I forget your last name, I'm sorry. But Ashley borrowed this album from me because this is one that I would also play like at the pool. And I just remember her really loving the song Say Sayonara.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's just another, like, I know someone I got to listen to this and she really liked that one.
And that's the one where he's kind of talking about the girl with green eyes and I grew out a mustache so you wouldn't fall in love with me is, I think, the theme of it is kind of what it's about.
I suppose this album, with, being sort of pop punk, power pop, it does fit with, 2004, like we were getting it, like we were in like the emo era, right? Like generally. So I feel like this girl that I worked with was very much probably into the whole emo thing. So it probably fit pretty well. I was still not super keyed into mainstream and was very much anti-emo as I continue to be. But yeah, she was emo, and she loved this album, and she particularly liked. I just remember her, like, she would actually just come in like singing that song like at work.
Funny.
So yeah,
that's funny. Last question that we go through every show is then, it's been 20 years. Why should somebody go back and check this out?
Everybody should go check this album out because one, just musically, it has talented musicians playing some great pop punk that is melodic and upbeat. Reese Roper is an amazing lyricist and will hit you in the feels.
Yeah.
with both joy and sorrow, anger. he will trip all of those triggers.
Yes.
If you allow him to, and it will be a great experience.
Yeah.
So, and there's even some bleeps and bloops occasionally.
Yes, there's plenty on this album.
Yeah. Even though it is not Brave Saint Saturn,
yes,
there are bleeps and bloops.
Exactly. So I'm going to preface mine one with, you should go check this out, but like you already mentioned, it's hard to check out. Got to find it on YouTube or find it in CD. That's it. It's not on streaming. I do think Reese owns the rights to it. But I don't think he's ever pushed to get it back on streaming. I think it's a bit of a bummer to me. So yes, you should check it out, but it's really hard to check out. You got to go to YouTube and find it. The other thing that I'm going to start with a bit of an anecdote. 20 years ago, I spent 2 years overseas. I come home. I always refer to 2004 as kind of my like wandering. I'm not married yet. I don't even think I had met my wife yet in 2004. And so I'm kind of like really trying to find myself, because post-college, I went straight overseas for 2 years. And then I came home, and I'm kind of like trying to figure out where I fit. And I'm kind of working 3 jobs. I'm kind of, I'm kind of all over the place in a lot of ways, like just trying to figure out where I fit and where I go. And what stood out to me is I remember being so excited for this album. Like I was so excited.
Like it's bringing you home.
Yes. And like, I was just like, this is great. This is the next thing. Reese is going to pick this up. 5 Iron's gone. I'm sad about that, but this is going somewhere. And I was involved in a Bible study at the time, and all of my Christian friends, nobody wanted to listen to this. Nobody wanted to check it out. Nobody was interested. And I make the joke. I made it a couple weeks ago on a show about American Idiot. Everybody else just wanted to listen to Shane and Shane. And I thought, what the crap are you people doing? You are missing out on this. It's like they would talk about the lyrics of Shane and Shane. And I'm not trying to crap on Shane and Shane. It's fine if you like them. But I'd read the lyrics and I'd be like, this isn't that good, people. Like, these are lyrics. These are thought provokers. These are interesting. And I remember being so disappointed. It was one of those moments which I still feel to this day. I feel pretty alone in a lot of evangelical circles. I don't feel like I fit in. I feel like I have to kind of keep my mouth shut. Nobody cares about the music I'm into. And I've found some, spots where I do it, and I found a good online community, but I feel really alone in evangelical communities. And it was one of the most, as an adult out on my own for the first time, it was one of those moments that I felt really alone. And so this album has this weird personal connection as a young adult who all of a sudden feels like he doesn't fit in a church setting. So my not feeling like I fit in a church setting goes all the way back to 2004 and is amazingly tied to Reese Roper and this album. So that's a little anecdote. It has nothing to do with why you should go check this out, but it made me think of it as I was preparing for this.
Yeah. Not that I necessarily need to defend myself, but I listening to your story makes me contemplate why, though, as I said, I did get this album, I think fairly early on after its release, and I listened to it a lot, that I don't have the deep connection perhaps you have, is during that time period, I was actually listening to a lot of Christian, or some people would use the term holy hip hop. Like I was listening to like Flame and Cross Movement and No Diverbs and Christian hip hop, because I was at that time still very involved in the sort of mainstream evangelical Christianity. Because I was actually involved with Impact, which was basically the African-American version of Campus Crusade.
Yeah.
And that's what got me into Christian hip-hop, because I'm going to these Impact events and stuff around the country as a member of the Impact movement, which is what actually later, though, inspired me to sort of, I guess, go back to my own musical roots and start my Christian ska website
Yeah.
that year.
Yep.
Yeah, I was literally going to see things like cross movement concerts and stuff. So that might be it, though. Yeah, I was just in definitely a different period in my life than you were.
Yeah.
So I think I was sad that Five Iron Frenzy was gone, but maybe not as much. I was just sort of like, well, I still have the albums I can listen to.
Yeah.
Like it's sad they're not making more, but I'm gonna keep listening to them, and I'll also listen to this Christian hip hop that I was just getting into sort of at the time.
Yeah.
So that might be where my head was at the time.
Yeah. So my actual answer of why you go back and listen to this is I think it's really, really listenable. It's fun. It's the kind of this perfect power pop, punk pop, pump, whatever, more P words. It's really good. It's melodic. It's catchy. I think it's really, really good lyrically. It's fun. It's going to, make you chuckle. It's going to make you, kind of have some moments that are funny, that are enjoyable, but then it's also got these really, really, really unique, thought-provoking moments. So it kind of goes all over the place. It has a lot of balance. There's a lot of different elements and things to like. And you get a pop punk cover of Shania Twain's, what's the song? I'm going to forget it now.
You're the One?
You're the One. That's it. Yeah. So you get a Shania Twain cover in the middle of all of that. So
I mean,
so there you go.
At that period in my life, I did like Shania Twain. Maybe not necessarily her music,
right?
But I mean, her music was fine.
Yeah.
But she was an attractive lady. She still is, I suppose.
My guess is she still is. I have not probably seen a picture of Shania Twain in
so
probably 20
but
years.
I mean, it's exactly. If you need a power punk cover of that song of Shania Twain by Reese Roper, this is the album for you.
Yeah. So I think it's worth going back and checking out. Just for context, this is I put out a list of my favorite albums of all time. This comes in really high. It's number 11. So I obviously give it a very, very high recommendation. It goes all the way up. It's above a couple Five Iron albums even. That's how much I really did love this album. So yeah.
I should make a list like that. Like people like you and Josh make these lists.
Yep.
And sometimes to me, it almost seems a little self-indulgent on your part. But maybe I'd get something though out of making that list. Maybe there would be some sort of introspection I would do, looking into what I really like and picking my top 100 albums.
Yeah, it is self-indulgent, but it's I pushed back against it. I was like, no. And Josh and Eric both did push me. They were like, well, you should try it. Just try it. They were like super encouraging about like, it's your list. Like, cause like one of the things that I was worried about it is like, oh, but what if I don't agree with it in 2 months? And Josh was just like, who cares? Like you just edit it in 2 years and just say this at this moment and this time, this is my list. It's your list. Who cares?
Yeah.
Like, and so that was super encouraging. So I went out to do a top 10. I've told this story before. I went out to do a top 10 and that proved way harder than doing a top 150 because this wouldn't have made my top 10 and I'd feel really bad about that, but it makes number 11, which is still really, really high. And so it's actually easier to do a bigger list than to do a smaller list because you can include more and you don't feel too bad about being like, hey, this is number 42 on my list. 42 is pretty high still if you're talking about somebody who has well over 2,000 albums. So yeah.
It would be tough because I mean there would be some pressure to me to like include things that I'm like, I don't know. I guess it has to be my list because I'm like, oh, do I feel like I must put like some Beatles albums really high up there just because they're like one of the most influential bands ever?
Yeah.
But if they're not really in my top 20 or whatever, like, do I put them up there? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the fun of it is it's your favorite. Because I would say if you're making the best, you've got to put Marvin Gaye's What's Going On and you've got to put Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder. Those have got to be top 10. If they're not top 10, you're talking the greatest. And those are not in your top 10, I think your list is invalid. It should just be thrown out. But if you're doing it's your favorite, I don't have either of those in my top 150, even though I think technically and from what those albums bring musically, they're perfection. but they're not my favorites.
Yeah, nobody can disagree with the fact that they are your favorite either.
Exactly.
They can say you have poor taste,
right?
But they can't. Like, there's no real disagreeing with, like, oh, that's your favorite. Like, I can't say no, Caleb, that's not your favorite.
Yeah. I get it about once a month because when I do my music posts, I always try to include if an album makes my top 150. And so I always try to include it, and I included it on one. And this guy who I've never heard from since jumped on and was like, because it was a Switchfoot album, and he was like, where's this list? This comes in at 50 or whatever. And he's like, where is this list of yours? And I showed it to him, and he was like, oh my gosh, how can you have any of these albums ahead of this? And he was really, really mad. And I was like, make your own list then, dude. If you throw something out there, then we can critique that. But it was exactly. Such an odd response. And I was like, it's my favorite. Okay. What do you care? So, but yeah. That's it. That's our breakdown of Brace Yourself for Mediocre by Roper. Again, it was released October 19th, 2004. I feel very, very confident of that. It is celebrating a 20-year anniversary. Todd, you've been on the show a couple times. You've told people before, but where can people find you online?
One, the fact that that's a 20-year anniversary makes me feel very old.
Embrace being old. It's fun.
Yeah, I was in college. I was so young. But anyway... Socrates on a bike.
Yep.
Just on any form of social media, though I am much more of an Instagram person than I am a Twitter. And I don't even know how much longer I'll be on Twitter at all. It has never interested me, and it is interesting me even less. So yeah, but Instagram, Socrates on a bike is probably the best way to find me online.
Yeah, lots of pictures of bikes, lots of pictures of other things. The occasional pickle and boot shout out as you go to scenic, historic places in Iowa on a bike. So
they actually talked about that on their podcast.
Yeah,
yeah. My content, yes, that is a valid point, Caleb. Mostly bike related, occasional music related. Like, there'll be concert footage when I go to a concert or something. But sometimes philosophical. If you want quotes from, like, 19th to 20th century Basque thinkers like Miguel de Unamuno, dig into my Instagram. There you go. Because they're to be found there.
Awesome.
So. Or don't forget also Star Trek.
Yes, that's right. Star Trek, MXPX, 5 Iron Frenzy, bikes. I get that's pretty much the little philosophy.
If you had to program an AI to try to have the same interest as me, you just start with okay, have it watch all the Star Trek, listen to 5 Iron Frenzy and MXPX, read these philosophers, and it would probably get pretty close.
Probably be pretty close. Yep. Awesome. Well, I can't say thanks enough for joining me. Episode number 3. I think you're my most recurring guest now. I think you've taken the number 1 spot back. So congratulations to you.
Who is the other one?
Brock's catching you. Brock's been on twice.
I think I can take him.
Actually, Brock's been on 3 times. So you're tied with Brock now. So you and Brock.
I have met Brock. I know that he's super famous now.
Yeah, he Furnace Fest was his place.
I met him before he blew up. I am more of a Brock hipster. And though with that mustache, Brock is also a Brock hipster.
I'm a Brock hipster. That's pretty fantastic.
So, yeah, all of you come at me. I met Brock first before he even was a glimmer in Furnace Fest Eye.
Yeah.
So I met him at a 5 Iron Frenzy concert. Good music, not hardcore.
Well, he saw 5 Iron at Furnace Fest this weekend, so
That's true.
Yeah. We're totally giving away when we're recording this.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Oh, funny. Awesome, man. Well, I can't say thanks enough for joining me and talking about this album. Again, obviously a favorite of mine and one that's really important to me. So was excited to be able to find somebody to chit chat about this album. So thanks so much for joining me, man.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Album Anniversary Podcast. I want to say thanks again to Todd for joining me. It was great to have him on the show for the third time to talk about this album. Obviously, this album is really, really important to me, and I know he has a strong affection for Reese and for Five Iron and for all of their related things. So it was great to have him on the show one more time to talk about this album. Let us know what you thought. What do we get right? What do we get wrong? What are your thoughts on this album? What are your favorites from this album? You can find me on Twitter at KilledToSpy, no spaces. I'm also on Instagram at KilledToSpy with underscores. You can email me at KilledToSpyPodcasts@gmail.com. There is a S at the end of that, podcasts. If there are albums that should be on my calendar, let me know. I'll try and get them added. If they're worth celebrating, I want them to be on the calendar so people can hear about them and celebrate them and react to them on social media. If you want to join the show, the easiest way to do it is probably to follow me on Twitter. I will post about albums that I want to do a show on if a big anniversary is coming up and I don't have somebody lined up. Again, that's how Todd joined me for this one. I threw it out on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and he responded on Facebook and said he'd be interested in talking about this album. So got together and made it work, and that's the easiest way to do it. If I don't have somebody in mind, I'll throw it out there and see if somebody can join me and we can make it work. Please subscribe and share the podcast. If you're so inclined, leave a rating or review. I have heard it is an effective way to spread the word about podcasts. Most of all, I do want to say thanks if you engage with me at all on social media. It is always a thrill to see people get excited about old albums that I'm posting about. I put a lot of time and energy into those posts, so I really do appreciate when people interact and give me feedback and talk about why they love certain albums. If you enjoy this show, you might also enjoy the other show I do with my friend Scott. It's called I Survived Youth Group in the 90s, and it's not just a podcast where we reminisce about our youth and our youth group experience. We're trying to go and interview fellow 90s youth group kids and some from the 2000s and kind of find out how that youth group experience has impacted their lives, whether they're still at the church they were raised at or they've left the faith entirely. Again, we just want to hear their story and kind of how that youth group experience has impacted their lives. The music at the beginning and the end of this show is the instrumental version of the song Sing It Out at Street Level by Peg and the Rejected. Thanks again, and we will talk to you soon. We had a good time, though. It worked. Oh, shoot. I didn't hit record on Zoom. Hold on. I'm gonna start this over.
Yeah, no problem.
Hang on. Oh, man.
At least we didn't get very far.
Yeah. Man, I'm totally off my game here. Okay, I'm going to do the whole thing again. So, 3, 2, 1.
You